So I'll start out with just sort of like sketching my character, and I don't really have anything specific in mind right now. Like maybe I'll make the head kind of round and I'll give it like a long neck, and I'll make the body sort of like another stretched out sphere, and I'll give it some legs like that. And maybe this is going to be like a nice wide uh, body of like a biped character. Um, Give it some arms like that. Very silly, very sort of like simple design. I like to keep things pretty simple and like just sort of work originally using sort of like primitive shapes, which will then be sort of easier to block out in 3D. But just, I like to also just sort of like do whatever and not like limit myself when I'm at this point in the process. And you can definitely do more realistic stuff or more complex stuff. Um, but yeah, so I'm just kind of coming up with whatever here. I'll drop another stroke stop down, and I'll point out that one thing that I like as well, and one thing that can be really useful, is doing characters that are like symmetrical. So if I put a mirror stop under that stroke stop and I start to draw on the stroke stop, it will mirror whatever I'm doing. So if I want to make a character that's like mostly symmetrical, maybe, that can be handy for a number of reasons in 3D. Like rigging a symmetrical character is much easier than rigging a asymmetrical character, because you can just like copy the right side of the skeleton to the left side, and it'll save you time down the road. Obviously, like sometimes creatively, you want to do something more complex or more interesting than a symmetrical character. But also, you can, in addition to doing, a character with the mirror stop who's like perfectly symmetrical, you can merge that mirror stop with another stroke stop and turn that on, turn the display flag on the merge. And then I can sort of like add bits that are asymmetrical maybe to my character. And then I'll go back onto this one because I want to make some eyes, which are going to be symmetrical. And then I'll go back on here and I'll give them like a weird nose and give them a smile. And yeah, so anyway, I like sort of this whole process and doodling characters in here. And I think that this can be super fun and just like a good way to sort of get inspiration to begin with. I'll do like one more and then I'll decide maybe which character I want to design. So I'll do like a little box shape for the body here, and I'll give some feet with some toes. The same over here. I feel like Bob Ross right now. I'll make these eyes that are like bulging out here. And I think I'll change this up a little bit, actually. I think maybe instead of having the head come off here, I will select this stuff with the select tool. So I'm switching off of the like handle tool, which is what you have selected when you want to be using whatever tool that you have turned on in stops over here. And I'll select this, and then I'll just hit delete, and that will get rid of the head. And then I can merge in down here another stroke stop and draw a different head. So I will, I'll have this head coming out like this of the side, and I'll have this arm over here, making a very unconventional character design. And put some eyes over here. I will just give him a basic mouth like that and some hair. Now we got this really weird guy that looks kind of like his arm is his head or something like that. So anyway, cool. So now I have these like 3 sketches that I've done here. This sort of symmetrical guy, this one that's really weird, and then this one that I did at first. I feel like this might be a good one to build out. I also have these ones that I did earlier. A symmetrical guy here, and this one. And I think also one of the things that's like really important about doing this kind of sketch before you start modeling something is that it's just a much more kind of expressive way to come up with a design for a character. So if you're like just starting from scratch modeling a character in 3D, sometimes that can be cool, and sometimes you can kind of leverage the proceduralism like a little bit more to figure out how that character should look along the way. You also don't have to be totally solid on what your character is going to look like when you're first sort of sketching it or whatever. But it's like really not a very expressive process, like, you know, procedurally building out a character either through box modeling in sort of any 3D program or from you know, procedural methods in Houdini, or even from like sculpting using like, you know, working with really sort of small details at a time. You sort of lose the overall expressiveness or the sense of the character or whatever. So it's good to start off with something that you're working off as reference that you created in sort of a more expressive manner, like, you know, sketching something really quick or whatever. So yeah, I think I like this design the most over here with the weird body, and I'll probably adjust it more kind of once we start actually modeling in 3D. But yeah, any questions so far? This is all pretty basic, just like using Houdini is basically like a drawing tool. Cool. All right, so I will, now that I have this one that I want to work off as reference, and I have this highlighted in here, I'm going to go back to the object level here, click this one, and I have my title turned on over here. I want to turn this geo guy that I drew my sketch in on here. So I'll type sketch on this. And then one thing that I'm noticing real quick is that my scale is pretty big. Like I ended up drawing this character like very large. Like I can see my units are like, you know, 0 to 50. So like it's almost 50 meters wide or whatever. So I'm going to scale this character down a bit by jumping back into the sketch and using a transform SOP on there and scaling down to like 0.2. And then this is sort of a much better scale, I think, to be working with. I think in general, somewhere between sort of like the size of the pig head and like 10 times the size of the pig head is good, but probably not larger than that. So even this like 0.2 is maybe a little bit on the big side, but it's not too bad. Like it's about, I don't know, maybe like 8, you know, sizes up from the pig head. Maybe sticking to like the pig head specifically around that size is a good call. And this is important because like all the tools in Houdini by default are sort of designed to work with a certain size of like voxels. So the grid will be really insane if you, by default, if you like start at a really large scale or whatever. So yeah, I think we'll say this is a good size, like about sort of maybe like 3.5 meters wide or whatever. But definitely I would say, yeah, like trying to sort of stick roughly around the size of like the pig head or the rubber toy or Tommy. That's kind of a good scene scale. I mean, Tommy is like, the correct scale of like a realistic human in theory if you were making something in Houdini that way. So that's sort of what I use as reference. And it's not like super solid or, there's no like, I'm not like, an architect. So I'm not super careful about it, but it is definitely good to keep in mind, especially once you start getting into doing more kind of simulations and things like that. So yeah, let's jump back out of here. And then I will drop a new geo node, geo1, and we'll call this model. And I will double click in here. And now we can no longer see that reference sketch that I made. So the way that you fix that is by going up here to this button at the top right of the viewport and changing it from hide other objects to, you could have it say show all objects. So you'll see, like every object in the scene if you have them turned on. Or you can set it to ghost other objects, which is what I'm going to use, because that way, it's just sort of like a sketch that I'm sort of working around and building stuff around, which just makes it like a little bit lower opacity, basically, than if it was show all objects. It's a little bit brighter. But yeah, that is definitely super useful. So now there's lots of ways we can sort of start by blocking this character out. Obviously we can start with a sphere over here, and we could merge that with another sphere. I'm going to, rather than transforming the sphere directly, I'm just going to use a vanilla sphere with like the basic transforms on it, a radius of 1, all that, and plug that into a transform, and then plug that in here. And you'll see why in a bit later. So I'll move that around, scale it down, widen it a bit, and there can be sort of the character's body. I'll copy and paste this transform to get another sphere, and I will change the transforms on that to be, I'll merge it in here too, so we can see sort of that it's roughly the same size as the head. And then I'll do another one over here. I want to make an eye. So I will take this sphere. I will sort of center it out and make it so that it's like roughly the correct size of this eye here. Yeah. And then I could just bring that eye forward over here, and I'll merge the eye in as sort of its own stream, and then merge these all together for organizational purposes. So we'll call this like base, base, and we'll call this eyes. And I'll take this over here and make a copy of this eye by moving that transform around and bringing that over here. And yeah, that should be good. If I put a null down here also, and I turn the select flag on that, or turn the display flag on that, and then I press the template flag on this, I can sort of see that this lines up pretty closely with my character so far. So cool, I have a bunch of spheres. It's worth pointing out first that the sphere by default in Houdini is this primitive shape, so it's not made up of polygons and stuff, but we definitely want that to be made up of polygons. So we're going to switch from primitive up here to polygon mesh, and that's cool. And then I want to make the eye have a pupil on it. So what I'm going to do is create sort of this new stream that's feeding into these two transforms for the eyes. So plug these into like a null here. And then I'm going to transform this part with this display flag on up here like that. And this is going to be sort of like the pupil on the eye. So this is the eye, and then this is the pupil. And then I will color this in with a color sop and make this black. And then merge the eye with the pupil right here. And it will look like that. And then now if I go down to this bottom merge, I will see that I have these two pupils on these eyes, but they're looking up. So what we can do is transform this whole eye here and just rotate it down 90 degrees. So it's looking out. And that way now I also have this sort of control for the eye. So if I want to have my character looking around like this, I can just move that, right? If I want to move both eyes. And then if I want to move the eyes separately, I can take these two controls. So this is the left eye control, and this is the right eye control, and I can move those around. So that's cool. So this is like a very, very, very rough block, obviously, of this character. I think before we go further, there's a couple small tweaks I want to make. I want to make this eye a little bit flatter and a little bit bigger and bring it down like that. And now it'll look more like that.